and you're concerned. Charlotte has had a particularly personal, bitter experience which could have happened with a psychotherapist. But as far as this church goes, what to you is dangerous about the church, a church of which you were a minister and one of the original main guys?
There are a lot of things that are dangerous about it. The fact that John Roger has a personal power trip going on that has involved...
Who is John Roger? Do we have a picture of John Roger? We keep talking about John Roger. Have you got a picture up there? I hear people scurrying for it. Let's hit it, please. No? Oh, well, we'll get a picture of John Roger while you're talking about him. Go on.
Basically, if there was an opportunity for somebody to try and leave this organization freely, it's made very difficult, namely Wesley Whitmore, who you also know. Numerous death threats were made on his life, as well as Wendell Whitmore, his wife Susan. Now, John Roger was involved homosexually with a lot of the people on staff, including myself. It's not known by most of the ministers that that is a requirement to be on staff.
You're a homosexual?
No, I'm not a homosexual. I was involved homosexually with him, though. Because it's one of those things, once you're involved in the organization, then you find out that this is going to be required in order to keep your position on staff.
I would like to say something.
Go on, Ruth, say something.
A couple of things. One of them is the InSight organization, certainly in this country, functions completely separately from MSIA. And we have our separate board.
I think that's a load of rubbish, Ruth.
It is, Ruth. That is a lie. I really apologize, but it is a lie. And I think that what it does...
You say that as an MSIA minister?
Yes, I do. I don't bring my MSIA business into InSight.
Well, I was invited...
But you said it was a Ministry of Good
Can I just
Sorry.
say, I was invited to my first MSIA meeting by Scott Ringer, who was the director of InSight at the time, and it was held at his house.
Was he wrong to do that, Ruth? And on InSight work with an InSight person to invite them into the church?
I would
was he wrong?
question that he did that in InSight work. I don't know. I mean, if he did it, yes, it was inappropriate. I would never do that in InSight work.
He didn't. I mean, the thing was,
you were a friend of Scott's, though, weren't you?
I went to Scott for help after I became pregnant when Joey didn't contact me after he promised to contact me, and I was deeply distressed. I was told that he was a minister, which for me conjured up an image of somebody respectful. So I went to him for help.
We've been doing a lot of following up from the InSight office in London on behalf of you as well. I don't know if you're aware of that. We've spoken to Candy Semigran, InSight's
Yes,
chief
and
executive
since
officer.
Candy Semigran, since you've spoken to Candy Semigran, I've had one lot of money, and since that I've had nothing.
Candy Semigran can do nothing, Ruth. You shouldn't be talking to Candy. You talk to John Roger. He's the only one who runs these organizations. He's the only one who will allow anything to be done on the behalf of these people. Seriously.
But I'm not getting the idea of how this InSight course, which people go on for £300, if they got it in July, where does that lead them into? How do they do it?
Let's just take a quick picture. When were you ordained? 81, 82?
81.
81. That ordination, as I remember, took place at the Olympia on a break from InSight?
In actual fact, it wasn't you at all. It was Edgar in
Okay,
Eleni
Edgar,
and Andrew
fine.
John's
Well, it
house.
doesn't matter. Wasn't it taking place at the Olympia
No,
on
it
a
took
break?
place in Eleni and Andrew John's
All
home.
right. Often in the early days, these ordinations, the InSight course would be stopped, they'd take a break, and then there'd be all these ordinations that would be taking place on these breaks. Everybody who was involved as a minister, everybody who was involved as a facilitator for this organization had to be an initiate of John Rogers.
All right, let me ask Eric Tabbitt quickly. You went to an InSight course. What do you believe in this argument? Which way do you side?
I'm just appalled by what I'm hearing Ruth Lederman say when all this evidence is coming up.
Well, the evidence about the problems with the MSIA, MSIA has problems in America. Yeah. The forcing of the homosexual things with JR is causing problems in America. But Ruth's trying to keep InSight separate, and I'm not hearing you telling me how InSight takes you in there.
I can tell you.
Charlotte, go on.
Right, first of all, you're led to believe that JR is wonderful on the InSight courses. You're encouraged to read all his books.
Is that true? Is JR mentioned on the InSight courses? Yes. Malcolm.
I've been involved with InSight for about 4 years and done some of their courses. I've never had any involvement with JR or MSIA or anything. Nobody's ever spoken to me or invited me to be part of MSIA. And perfectly frankly, I'm not interested, and that's the way it stands.
Susie, you're a satisfied InSight customer. Is JR part of your life?
No.
Fine. Charlotte, where did it come in? Where did it come into you? Where were you brought into it?
Right, first of all, you're encouraged to read all his books. One of them is called Relationships. One of them is called You Can't Afford the Luxury of a Negative Thought.
Have you heard of these books, Susie?
They have nothing to do with a church. They are
No, exactly,
books.
and that's the thing. You're led to believe that these books are wonderful. You read them, and then you hear that JR has another organisation, and you meet assistants on the
course. The church is a total... Again, an illusion. Where does all that money go when those books are sold? Well, it's to the church.
I think.
What do you mean it's nothing to do with the church?
I've heard you say that you are led to believe, and you are led to believe. I wasn't led to believe anything at all. Yes, I know that there's a book called The Relationships, and yes, I think it's worth reading, and also the other book on the You Can't Afford the Luxury of a Negative Thought.
Okay, Eric wants to say something. Eric, please.
Yeah, I have the following statement, which was made by John Roger in 1986. To quote, some of you, he's addressing MSIA ministers, some of you know that InSight transformational seminars is the traveler's ministry and my ministry. That's something I committed 2 years ago.
It is the traveler's ministry. I mean, he calls himself the traveler, doesn't he, John Roger? Yes? I don't know. Victor, is he the traveler?
Well, in the ordinations, for instance, this is the way the ordinations go. We ordain you, you know, through the Melchizedek priesthood, the office of the Christ, the mystical traveler preceptor consciousness, and into God. Now, you figure out where the traveler puts himself in that order. Huh? And John Roger claims that he is the anchor point for this traveler consciousness on this planet. Namely, he is so close to God, you don't know which is which. When you're involved in the church, that indoctrination has become very keen, especially the closer you get on staff. Now, people who are working very closely on staff end up have to be following this guy as God. You do not doubt.
Okay. I mean,
I'd like to answer that.
Please, Ruth.
That's inaccurate information. In Germany, InSight is run by people who are not at all involved in MSIA and never have. Well, actually, for a year he was, but he facilitates InSight in Germany. Klaus Spray. No, Klaus.
Okay, well, we're asking about England. Ruth, we're getting near to the end because it's a long and complicated subject. I'm going to have to rush on. We've got only a few minutes left to go. Yes, someone from inside at the back there. Yes, you, madam, yes.
I'm actually an ex-board member of the MSIA board in this country. I came off the board very recently because of my own choice. And I want to make it absolutely clear that MSIA operates as a completely separate organization. We had nothing to do with InSight and organization.
Can I ask you, did you go to InSight before you got into MSIA? The answer? Yes.
No,
I know. You're saying it's not connected.
Funny enough,
right.
no.
I want to ask Ian Howard. Ian Howard, as an expert on cults, who actually once you gave your life to a cult, didn't you? You once gave all your money?
Yes.
How dangerous is this, or are we just, or is Victor worrying about something that's not really going to happen in England?
I go with the critics. The critics are right. It doesn't matter whether there are two legal entities here, different corporations, or 200. I know of a cult with nearly 300 different names. Roger is the leader, John Roger is the leader, and one organization is a vehicle into another. And in my 11 years' experience, I have dealt with InSight in North America and in this country, and I would suggest that people are heading for trouble if they head towards InSight stores.
All right, the gentleman on the far right over there, if we can get the camera over.
Okay, I've been involved with InSight for a couple of years. I'm actually on the current board of InSight in this country. We have no connection with MSIA. I am not involved with MSIA in any way.
You're not a minister? You're not in any way involved?
Absolutely not.
You don't think John Roger's God?
Absolutely not. I met John Roger once. I thought he was a funny little guy. You know, that's it.
And you're allowed to think that.
All right, Victor.
I think when you ask questions like, how is the case of Charlotte being decided in the InSight organization right now, and I will test you on this, who is being asked about that? And it is landing in John Roger's doorway right now. Candy has not the authority to answer that, nor does Russell, nor does any of these people. John Roger is the one who would singular yes or no whether she gets child support for that kid or not. And I think he personally should be made liable for that child, and the organization as well.
We heard that one of the guys have been sacked, but the one who hasn't is Joey. You know this man, Joey.
You know, the thing is, it's hard to take a case against Joey. Knowing what I do about homosexuality in that organization, it's hard to imagine how this guy, who was taken up and basically raised on this MSIA oatmeal, if you will, has really a clear indication himself from a broken home and everything else. Then he perhaps is involved homosexually with JR out of these therapeutic reasons, and because he needs to be closer to God, right? Then he gets his job as facilitator then, and then he's going to go ahead and help all these other people in the same fashion he's been helped. So now tell me, who's the one who's supposed to be responsible?
Who's responsible, Ruth?
Firstly, we do definitely have guidelines, and we do not have sex with participants definitely within the first few weeks of a seminar. We don't get involved. It's true. Sorry, guys. If you take an InSight seminar, you can't have me. But I'm serious. And so There is a policy about that.
Fine.
Now,
I understand the policy. We've got 30 seconds. I'm going to give 30 seconds to Ian and 30 seconds to you to finish off with. Go on.
The victim, I would see all of these people here as being
They
sincere
won't
people.
offensive me.
They're sincerely wrong, however, they're sincerely misguided by this group. They don't know what they're involved in.
Victor, quickly, just 15
This is
seconds.
the thing that's most important. There is something called cult-mindedness brainwash. These people believe in what they're doing. I was in Ruth's chair about 5 years ago and would have stood for it as ardently as she does right now. I was wrong. I can only say that I was wrong.
Victor, thank you. You got the last word, Ruth. He's saying you're brainwashed, you believe this and you're doing the best, but your brain's done.
I do other things as well as InSight. InSight to me is a practical tool for living everyday life well. It deals with relationships, it deals with goals, it deals with effectiveness at work. And I also have my own personal spiritual path. They have nothing to do with one another. I stay involved in InSight because it works in my life. The InSight staff in London are not involved in MSIA. We do our own thing here.
All right, Ruth, everyone's had their say, both sides. We've explored what is a very important issue, InSight, coming to Manchester in which month? July. Thank you.